From his bedroom, she knocked on his window. "I need a boyfriend." Then he saw the ring. It was almost midnight. Matthew was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when he heard it. 3 small knocks. Not on his door. On his window. He froze. His bedroom was on the 2nd floor. He pulled back the curtain, and there she was. Jennifer. His neighbor. Her eyes were red. Her hair was messy. And her hands were pressed flat against the glass like she had been standing there, working up the courage, for a long time. He opened the window. She looked straight at him and said, "I need you to be my boyfriend." Matthew opened his mouth. But before he could say a single word, he saw it. A ring. Sitting right there on her finger. Glinting under the moonlight like a secret she had not told him yet. If this story already has your heart racing, you are not alone. Stay with us. Because this is only the beginning. Matthew did not slam the window shut. He did not laugh. He did not tell her she was crazy for showing up at his 2nd floor window at midnight with a ring on her finger and desperation in her eyes. He just stepped back. And said, "Come in." Jennifer climbed through the window like she had been planning it for hours. Maybe she had. She sat on the edge of his bed, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. Matthew pulled up the chair from his desk and sat across from her. He did not rush her. He did not ask 100 questions. He just waited. And slowly, she started to talk. Her name was Jennifer Reyes. She had lived next door for almost 2 years. They had exchanged maybe 40 words in that entire time. A good morning here. A sorry about the noise there. She was quiet. Private. The kind of person who kept her curtains drawn and her problems to herself. But tonight, she could not hold it anymore. She told him about her family. A traditional household. A mother who believed a woman's future was built around the right last name. A father who made decisions first and asked questions never. And an arrangement, quiet and firm, that had been decided long before Jennifer had any say in it. His name was Daniel. Daniel Cho. Successful. Presentable. Completely approved of by every auntie and uncle in her family's circle. On paper, he was everything a family like hers would want. Stable income. Good reputation. The kind of man who showed up to family dinners with expensive wine and an even more expensive smile. But Jennifer knew something the dinner table did not. Behind closed doors, Daniel was cold. Controlling. The kind of man who checked her phone and called it love. The kind of man who told her what to wear and called it care. She had tried to explain this to her mother once. Her mother had smiled softly and said, "Every strong man takes time to understand." That was 6 months ago. And last week, Daniel had made it official. He had gone to her father. Had a conversation over tea and handshakes. And just like that, Jennifer was engaged. No proposal. No question. Just a ring placed on the kitchen table and a family full of congratulations she had never asked for. She looked down at her hands now. "I don't love him," she said quietly. "I've never loved him." Matthew said nothing. He just listened. She told him that the only way out, the only thing her family might actually respect, was if she was already with someone. Someone real. Someone they could meet. Someone who could make them pause long enough for the whole arrangement to fall apart on its own. And that was when she had thought of him. Matthew. Quiet Matthew next door. The one who always held the elevator. The one who shoveled her walkway last winter without being asked. The one who felt safe. "I know this is insane," she said. "I know we barely know each other. But I don't have anyone else I trust enough to ask." Matthew leaned forward. His elbows on his knees. His eyes steady on hers. He should have said no. Any reasonable person would have said no. This was messy and complicated and built entirely on a lie. He knew that. But something about the way she said trust stopped him cold. Because no one had said that word to him in a very long time. He exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." Jennifer finally looked up. And for the first time that night, the tension in her face broke just slightly. Not into a smile. But into something quieter. Relief. Matthew saw it. And somewhere deep in his chest, without any warning, something shifted. If you felt every word of that, drop a comment below and tell us. Would you have said yes? Because Matthew just changed both their lives. And he doesn't even know it yet. It started small. That was the thing about slow fires. They never announced themselves. They just quietly caught, one spark at a time, until everything around them was warm without anyone noticing the heat. The first week was practical. Jennifer sent Matthew a text with her family's group chat name, her mother's favorite topics, and a short list of things Daniel had told her family about himself, just so Matthew could be prepared. She was organized. Precise. Like she was briefing a colleague before an important meeting. Matthew read every word. Saved the message. And then sat quietly for a moment, realizing he was studying for a role in someone else's life. He told himself it was fine. It was fine. They had coffee the next morning. Not romantic coffee. Planning coffee. Jennifer brought a notepad. She had written down the basic story, how they met, how long they had been together, who made the first move. Matthew looked at the notepad and almost laughed. Almost. But the look on her face was so serious, so focused, so quietly desperate, that the laugh never made it out. He picked up the pen instead. "I should be the one who made the first move," he said. "It'll be more believable." Jennifer looked up. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because I'm the neighbor. I had easier access." She stared at him for one long second. And then, just barely, the corner of her mouth moved. It was not a full smile. It was smaller than that. Quicker. Like it had slipped out before she could stop it. But Matthew saw it. And he held on to it longer than he should have. By the second week, they had settled into a rhythm. Evening walks around the block, just in case anyone from her family's network happened to drive by. Staged photos in the park, Jennifer with her head tilted toward his shoulder, Matthew with his hand just barely touching her back. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to look real from the outside. But here was the thing no one tells you about pretending. The body does not always know the difference. When Jennifer laughed at something he said on one of those walks, a real laugh, loud and unguarded, Matthew felt it land somewhere in the center of his chest like it belonged there. When she reached for his arm automatically while crossing the street one evening and then quickly pulled her hand back, embarrassed, he missed the warmth of it before she was even fully gone. He told himself it was the performance. He was getting too into the role. That was all. By the third week, the photos were no longer just for her family. They were cooking together on a Tuesday for no reason. She was showing him how her grandmother made rice, impatient and half-laughing when he kept stirring it wrong. He was standing closer than necessary because the kitchen was small and neither of them moved away. Her music was playing from her phone on the counter. Something soft. Something old. And for 20 whole minutes, neither of them said a word. Just the sound of the spoon against the pot. The smell of something warm. The strange and unbearable comfort of another person simply being there. Matthew looked at her once during that silence. She did not look back. But he noticed that she was smiling. Not the performance smile. Not the careful, practiced expression she wore when she talked about Daniel or her family or the plan. Just a real one. Quiet and private and completely unaware of itself. Matthew turned back to the stove. And made a decision he did not say out loud. He was going to enjoy every single second of this. Even if it cost him everything when it ended. That silent kitchen moment, did it get you? Because it got us too. If you're feeling this story in your chest right now, hit that like button and keep watching. It's about to get so much deeper. It was always going to get complicated. That was the thing about building something fake in a real world. Real people had real eyes. And real eyes noticed everything. It started with the neighbors. Mrs. Park from across the street mentioned it first, casually, over her morning newspaper, the way older women drop observations like they are not watching everything. She told Matthew he looked different lately. Lighter. He smiled and said nothing. She smiled back like she already knew everything he was not saying. Then it was his co-workers. Matthew worked in a mid-sized architecture firm downtown. Quiet job. Structured days. The kind of office where people minded their business until they suddenly did not. His desk partner, Rico, noticed the change first. Matthew was showing up with coffee he had not made himself. He was checking his phone and smiling at nothing. He was leaving exactly on time instead of staying late the way he always had before. Rico leaned over one afternoon and said, "Who is she?" Matthew kept his eyes on his screen. "Nobody." Rico laughed. "Nobody doesn't make you smile like that." Matthew said nothing. But he was smiling again. The real test came on a Saturday afternoon. Jennifer called him at noon, her voice tight, her words fast. Her mother was coming. Today. Unannounced, the way her mother always did things. She would be there in 2 hours and she wanted to meet the man Jennifer had apparently been spending all her time with. Matthew was at the hardware store when he got the call. He left his card in the middle of the aisle. He was at her door in 20 minutes. Her mother's name was Mrs. Reyes, a small woman with sharp eyes and a handshake that felt like a test. She looked at Matthew the way a person looks at a contract before signing. Carefully. Slowly. Missing nothing. She asked him about his job, his family, his plans for the future. She asked how he and Jennifer had met. She asked what he admired most about her daughter. Matthew did not hesitate. He talked about the way Jennifer paid attention to things other people overlooked. The way she remembered small details, like how he took his coffee or which side of the street had broken pavement. He said she had a kind of quiet strength that most people never noticed because she never asked anyone to notice it. He said it all steadily. Calmly. Like every word was simply true. Because somewhere between saying it and hearing himself say it, he realized it was. Mrs. Reyes studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at her daughter. Jennifer was already looking at Matthew. And the expression on her face was something Mrs. Reyes had not seen there in a very long time. Softness. After her mother left, the apartment went quiet. Jennifer stood by the window with her arms crossed, not angry, not relieved. Just somewhere in the middle of something she could not name. Matthew stood near the door, jacket still on, keys still in his hand. "You didn't have to say all that," she said softly. "I know," he said. "You could have just given her basic answers." "I know," he said again. She turned to look at him. "Did you mean it?" Matthew held her gaze. His keys pressed into his palm. His heart pressed against something it had been leaning on for weeks now. And the honest answer was sitting right there, clear and obvious and terrifying. He smiled instead. "I'm a good actor," he said. Jennifer looked at him for one more second. Then she nodded slowly and looked away. But her hands, the ones crossed tightly over her chest, held on just a little bit tighter. Like she was trying to hold something in. And Matthew walked out the door before he said something that would ruin everything. Right now, somewhere between that answer and that silence, everything changed. Did you feel it? Tell us in the comments, do you think Jennifer already knows? Because we think she does. Don't go anywhere. The next part will break your heart. It was Jennifer's cousin who figured it out. Her name was Sophia. 26 years old. Bright, observant, and the kind of person who asked the questions everyone else was too polite to ask. She had been watching Matthew and Jennifer at a family dinner for exactly 40 minutes before she pulled Jennifer into the kitchen and closed the door behind them. "How long?" Sophia asked. Jennifer set down her glass. "What? How long have you actually known him?" The kitchen was small. The noise from the dining room bled through the walls. Jennifer could hear her mother laughing at something Matthew had said, warm and genuine, the way her mother laughed when she truly approved of something. "We've been neighbors for 2 years, Jennifer said carefully. Sophia shook her head. "That's not what I'm asking and you know it." There was a silence between them. The kind that said more than words could. Sophia had grown up with Jennifer. Had shared bedrooms and secrets and long drives home from school. She knew every version of Jennifer's face, including the ones Jennifer thought she hid well. "He looks at you like you're real," Sophia said quietly. "And you look at him like you're scared." Jennifer said nothing. "People who are actually together don't look scared," Sophia added. "They look sure." Jennifer held it together through dinner. She smiled at the right moments. She touched Matthew's arm twice, naturally, the way they had practiced. She answered her aunt's questions about the future with vague but warm answers. She was composed and convincing and completely falling apart on the inside. Because Sophia was right. And the worst part was not that the secret was cracking. The worst part was what was underneath it. Daniel showed up at 9 o'clock. No invitation. No warning. Just a knock at the front door and a silence that fell over the whole room the moment Jennifer's father opened it. He walked in with that expensive smile and that cold, composed energy that always made Jennifer feel like the temperature had dropped without anyone touching a window. He looked across the room. Found Jennifer immediately. Then found Matthew. And the smile stayed, but the eyes changed. Matthew saw it. He stood up slowly from his chair. Daniel crossed the room with his hand extended, polite, practiced, deliberately calm. "You must be the neighbor," he said. The word neighbor landed like a blade. Matthew shook his hand. "Matthew," he said simply. "Daniel," he replied. "Jennifer's fiancé." The room shifted. Some people looked at their plates. Some looked at Jennifer. Matthew kept his eyes on Daniel and his expression completely still. But his jaw tightened. Just slightly. Later, after the dinner ended and the family filtered out, Daniel found a moment alone with Matthew near the front door. He spoke quietly. Pleasantly. With the tone of someone who had rehearsed it. "She told me about you," Daniel said. "The helpful neighbor." He tilted his head slightly. "I want you to know, I'm not a man who shares what belongs to him." Matthew looked at him for a long moment. "Good thing," Matthew said evenly, "that people don't belong to anyone." Daniel's smile did not move. But something behind his eyes did. Outside, in the cold, quiet dark of the parking lot, Matthew exhaled slowly. His hands were steady. His face was calm. But something inside him had shifted permanently in that dining room. Something that had started as a favor and grown into feelings had just collided with a reality he could no longer pretend was not there. He pulled out his phone. Typed a message to Jennifer. "We need to talk." He stared at it for a long moment. Then he sent it. And then he said, out loud, to no one, in the middle of that empty parking lot. The thing he had been holding back for weeks. "We cannot tell you what he said. Not yet. But if your heart is pounding right now, ours is too. Subscribe and stay with us. Because what Matthew just admitted to himself changes everything that happens next." Jennifer read the message at 10:47 p.m. She was sitting on her bathroom floor, back against the tub, knees pulled to her chest, ring sitting on the edge of the sink where she had placed it the moment she got home. She stared at Matthew's text for a long time. 3 words. Quiet and direct, and somehow the most frightening thing she had read all evening. She did not reply. Not that night. Matthew came over the next morning. She let him in without a word. Made coffee without asking how he took it, because she already knew. 2 sugars. No cream. She set the mug in front of him and sat across the table and waited. The apartment was very quiet. The kind of quiet that had weight to it. The kind that meant something important was about to happen, and both people in the room already knew it. Matthew looked at her. "I can't keep doing this," he said. Jennifer wrapped both hands around her mug. "I know. Not because it's hard," he continued. "But because it stopped being fake a long time ago. For me." The words landed softly. But they landed heavy. Jennifer stared at the table. "Matthew. I'm not asking you for anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. Because standing in that room last night, watching him talk to you like you were something he owned, I couldn't just be the neighbor anymore." Jennifer closed her eyes. And in the silence that followed, Matthew watched something move across her face. Pain. Recognition. And something else. Something she was actively pushing down before it could rise too far. "This was never supposed to go here," she said quietly. "I know," he said. "I asked you for one thing. A simple thing. I know that too." And now, she stopped. Pressed her lips together. Shook her head slowly. "Now it's complicated. And I already have complicated. I have too much complicated." Matthew nodded. He did not argue. He did not reach across the table. He just sat with it, the way he had learned to sit with hard things. Quietly. Without demanding anything from the moment. That afternoon, Jennifer called her mother. She did not end the engagement. She told her mother that things with Matthew were moving too fast. That she needed space to think. That Daniel was a good man and maybe she had been unfair to him. Her mother listened and said all the things Jennifer expected her to say. Relieved things. Careful things. Things wrapped in tradition and expectation and love that did not always know how to make room for the person it was meant for. When she hung up, she sat very still for a long time. Then she walked to the sink. And put the ring back on. Matthew saw it 2 days later. He did not see her put it on. He saw it after, through the window, by accident. She was in her kitchen, reaching up to a high shelf, and the ring caught the light the same way it had that very first night. That midnight night. The night that had started all of this. He stood at his window for a moment. Then he stepped back. Closed the curtain. And sat down on the edge of his bed, the same spot where she had sat when she told him everything, and said absolutely nothing. No text. No knock. No reaching out. Just silence. And that silence was the most painful thing Matthew had ever chosen. Because it was not the silence of someone who did not care. It was the silence of someone who cared so completely, that he refused to be one more person in her life who made her feel like she had no choice. He would not be that. Even if it meant losing her. Even if it already hurt like he already had. That kind of love, the kind that lets go instead of holds on too tight, is the rarest kind there is. If this story is sitting heavy on your heart right now, you are exactly where we want you. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this. And please, don't leave yet. Because Jennifer is not done. 3 weeks passed. Matthew counted them without meaning to. 23 days of quiet hallways and careful timing. Of leaving for work early enough to avoid the sound of her door. Of coming home late enough that her lights were already off. He was not avoiding her out of anger. He was avoiding her out of something much harder than anger. He was protecting what was left of himself. On the 24th day, it rained. Heavy and steady, and the kind of rain that makes the whole world feel smaller. Matthew was sitting at his desk by the window, not working, just watching the water run down the glass in thin crooked lines. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. His architecture plans were open on the screen, but he had not touched them. He was just sitting. Thinking about nothing specific. Thinking about everything. And then he heard it. 3 small knocks. Not on his door. On his window. Matthew did not move for a full 5 seconds. His heart did something complicated in his chest. He stood slowly. Crossed the room. And pulled back the curtain. Jennifer. Standing on the narrow ledge outside his second-floor window in the rain. Hair soaked flat against her face. Jacket dark with water. Eyes red, but not the desperate red of that first night. This was different. This was the red that comes after a long and private cry that finally said everything it needed to say. He opened the window. She did not climb in this time. She just stood there. Breathing. Looking at him like she was memorizing his face before saying something she could not unsay. Matthew waited. He was good at that. I ended it, she said. The rain filled the silence between the words. With Daniel? He asked, even though he already knew. With all of it, she said. The arrangement. The performance. The version of my life that everyone else designed for me. Matthew looked at her hands. No ring. Just her. Wet and tired and more herself than he had ever seen her. My mother cried, Jennifer continued. My father didn't speak for an hour. Daniel said things I won't repeat. She exhaled shakily. It was the hardest conversation I have ever had in my life. I know, Matthew said softly. But I kept hearing something, she said. The whole time. Through all of it. What? She looked straight at him. You, she said simply. I kept hearing the things you said. About me. To my mother that day. About the way I notice things. About quiet strength. She swallowed. You said things about me that I didn't even know were true until you said them. Matthew said nothing. His hand was resting on the window frame. The rain was reaching his sleeve now. He did not move. I don't have a plan, Jennifer said. I'm not here with a notepad or a strategy or a list of things to say. I'm just, her voice broke slightly. I'm just here. As myself. Asking if that's enough. Matthew looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had knocked on his window with a ring and a desperate plan. Who had cooked beside him in a quiet kitchen. Who had smiled when she thought no one was watching. Who had walked away because she was afraid, and walked back because she was brave. He reached out. Gently took her hand. And pulled her in from the rain. She stepped through the window and into the warm light of his room. Dripping and exhausted and finally, free. Matthew did not say I told you so. He did not say I knew this would happen. He just looked at her, really looked, and said the only thing that was honest and simple and completely true. You have always been enough. Jennifer broke. Not apart. But open. The way people break when they finally feel safe enough to. She leaned into him. He held on. The rain kept falling outside the window. The curtain moved softly in the cold air. And in that small warm room, 2 people who had started as strangers and pretended to be lovers finally became something real. Something chosen. Something that belonged entirely to themselves. And that, right there, is what it looks like when someone stops performing their life and starts actually living it. If this story moved you, if it stayed with you, if it reminded you of something real, please subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who needs to believe that real love still finds its way. And drop a comment below, tell us the moment you knew Jennifer was going to go back to that window. We read every single one. Thank you for staying until the very last word. We will see you in the next story.